So the Serpent River book also makes part of this body of work that's called Be Damned. It was produced last year, but it's been in my head since 2012 when I found a map of the Berlin Wall. And this map was an accordion fold that had some pleats that when you pleated and completed, it would be the perimeter of the Berlin Wall, closing in itself. And it was an amazing map in terms of design because it would close in itself, but it was the first map of the Berlin Wall that didn't hold anything because there was a hole in the middle at the end. It was just the perimeter. And I found this map in a federal archive in Berlin because I was looking for water infrastructure. And this map was showing where the dirty and clean water pipes were passing through the wall. The map didn't have any information. The librarian was pretty surprised that I dig it out. And there's no date, so obviously it's done after the Berlin Wall was at least planned. And we don't know, I have two theories, that it could be either a map to, an engineering map to see where did you have to do work to divide the infrastructure, or a security map because people were escaping and moving between the two Berlins through the water pipes and the sewage pipes. So when I found the map and I started unfolding and pleating it, I thought about river immediately because, the map started to meander. And I said, I have to appropriate this format to do a river book. And what I did is that the middle page of the map, it's a 72-page accordion fold, the middle page I did 180 degrees, so the map, instead of closing in itself, it opened, and from a wall it became a river. And this is the base, the format base of the book. But of course I imbued my own contents in that format, using not only the upper part, but also including information in the pleats that in the original map are white, and also printing the back too. So there's a different amount of narratives imbued into this format. So this is where the format came from. And the book is constructed not as a catalog or as a conclusion of a body of work, but more thinking of how all that information and compilation, visual and text information that is included in the book allowed me to expand the project into many other lines, no? So I didn't want to make a catalog of the book that said, okay, here's my last 5 years of work, nothing else, but actually, okay, it allowed me to revise all the material and archive that I had built up, of course, select some of it to include it in the book, and then see where this will take me, what are the further steps. So the book contains visual material from archives, from photographic archives. So there's aerial photography, for example, from the Institute Agustín Codazzi here in Colombia. There is satellite imagery. There is images contributed by activists and people resisting these hydropower projects on the ground. And the texts are also a compilation of some of the texts written by me. There is a couple of poems by very important, poets like Langston Hughes or Bertolt Brecht. There's a poem written by a woman who was displaced by the San Marco crime in Brazil in 2015. That was a mine tailing dam that broke in Brazil and contaminated the whole Doce River. That's a beautiful text in Portuguese that's called How to Become an Affected Person, for example. There's text in different languages, in French, in English, in Spanish, in Portuguese, precisely thinking about the diverse audience that this book can reach. So it's an artist book with a limited edition of 250 copies. It was printed and bound here in Colombia. The cover is also comes out of a series of water portrait series. So that's the cover is a printed lining, and I wanted the book to make a book that could work in different contexts. So The book has been exhibited as an object, so we constructed a custom-made table for the meandering of the book, and we have exhibited like that, like kind of in a more sculptural way in different institutions. But the book is also a tool and a resource to workshop with communities who are in resistance. So some of the books have been sold to, university libraries, artists' book collections and whatnot, but most of the books have been distributed for free among communities that I've been working with and that are resistant hydropower. So earlier this year, 2018, I had the chance to distribute some of the books in the communities of Antioquia affected by the Hidroituango Dam. The crisis hadn't happened yet. And also in the communities of El Quimbo in El Huila, affected by El Quimbo Dam in El Huila. I was very nervous of how it was going to be received because a lot of people in resisted and organized against the hydroelectric are very simple people who live from the earth, who necessarily don't read, for example, that have other kind of knowledges. So for me, it was very important to make a very visual book. So the upper part is just a river of images. It's like a super long meandering collage, just images. And also include texts that were not essay-like or very heavy and theoretical, but more poems, like a rewriting of myths of origin, for example, that any audience could be able to read, kids, adults, So I always had in mind the communities, how they could use the book, and the choosing and the placement of the images are very precise, so they can trigger certain conversations about resistance, about extractivism, about the body as the first territory, for example, about ancestral practices, practices of buen vivir, the good life. The first thing to open an agenda when there's a community meeting is the mística, or like a mystic moment, which is not tied to any religious practice specifically, and that takes many forms, and it depends of who is in charge of the mystic. So I know the book has been used as two open sessions, two open meetings, because you read a little bit, like one of the poems, or you show we're in this book, or you share it. So it's been used in many ways. And we have also shown it in performance. So we have performed with the book. The book is not only a tool for workshopping or a resource for workshops, but it's also a tool for making performances. So we have danced with the book, we have used it, we have activated in simpler workshops, like one-day workshops where we kind of navigate with the book, a whole institution, kind of, actually flow and make the book an actual river and make that book like flow through the institution. The book is divided in chapters which resonate or actually mirror the parts of a river. So you have a source, an upper part, a middle part, a lower part, and a delta. These are the chapters of the book. The first chapter, or the first part, the source, is showing both on the upper side, that's images, and on the back side, that is text, more text, shows the ancestral knowledge and approach to rivers. So, and based on an Amazonian knowledge. So in the Amazon, the river is the Cobra Grande, the Yurupari, the Yacumama. It's a big snake. It's one of the four big snakes that kind of meander through the world. You have the snake in the cosmos, in the air, in the water, and under the earth. So the book is that first part is portraying this ancestral approach. The upper part, or the second chapter, is talking about more peasant knowledge or campesino knowledge that is direct descendant and takes so much from that actually indigenous ancestral knowledge. It's a continuation of that set of tools, ritual, magic, economical, social set of knowledges that are totally imbricated into the territory. The middle part is, so let's say that all the chapters kind of unfold these different perspectives over a territory. The middle part is showing the more corporate perspective. So you start seeing maps as we know them in the Western tradition, architectural and engineering plans for dams, actual images and photography of dams, a satellite image of the construction of El Quimbo Dam. So we kind of pass into this corporate perspective. The fourth chapter, or the lower part, is when this corporate perspective, extractivist approach to the territory collapses. So you see images of, for example, that dam, mine-tailing dam breaking. You see images of dams collapsing, of rivers finding their own course, so like overflowing rivers. And the last part is the response of the communities to these extractivist projects. And not so much in terms of legal responses, but more visual, creative responses. So you see images of graffitis, like that are denouncing certain things. You see images of people going back to the river and having fun and having like a family day along the river. You see images of direct cultural actions that have happened in the different territories that I've worked in Colombia and Brazil. And the book finishes with an image of the delta of the Paraná River taken by an astronaut, actually. And it has a little phrase that says, that is paraphrasing actually a book by Eduardo Kohn, How Forests Think. And it says, when I look into your eyes, you stop being a piece of meat. Like, no, I am the jaguar. And when I look into your eyes, you stop being meat and you become another jaguar. And this phrase is actually precisely referencing what is the ultimate goal of all this body of work, is the change of paradigm, and understand that we need the other to become. We cannot be remain in this Western tradition that says, I think, therefore exist, which means that you don't need anything else in the world to be a human, when it's actually the total opposite. We need the other to exist. It's only until the jaguar looks into our eyes, when the river touches your body, when you breathe the air, or when another entity of the territory perceives you, that's the moment when you become. The form of the book, the fact that you can stretch it, bind it up again, play with its pleats, everything has to do with this notion, because it's a book that doesn't have one narrative, but has so many, but actually also allows that anyone that grabs the book and works with it can imbue their own narrative into the book. And that was one of the things that were very important in the construction and the disposition of the images and the text, is that you could start looking at the book from any page. There's no beginning and no end. You can start in the middle, you can start through a pleat, you can start on the back. You can stretch the book like this, but also like this, or you can make a form with it, actually, that we've been exploring that. You can wrap your body with the book. So yeah, and that was important, that anyone could imbue their own narrative into that book, that there's not an established narrative, not an established time or beginning or end, but that there's so many possibilities with it. That's why I wanted to end with a delta more than a mouth, because when you understand when you understand when the river ends is like the mouth, it debouches into another water or into another river, and then that's the end. But I don't think this is a very productive way of thinking about a debouching of a river. I like to think about deltas, and the moment when a river, kind of instead of ending, it just splits into so many bodies, or touches, in Spanish we say las juntas, is when the two bodies of water connect. That's one of the most sacred places on earth, when two bodies of water connect and touch and become something else, or just become bigger, or the idea of the delta, that's this thing. So that's why the kind of what I call the end of the book, but it's not really the end, because It's actually an end that's inviting other books to connect, no? And actually one of the idea of having this book with this format is that I can do more books that can connect to this one, because a river is never alone. It actually has so many, little streams that connect to it, and that, so that's the idea, that we can continue doing publications that can connect to this one and grow. Part of my methodology is doing field work, no? Of course, I go to the territory, spend time. I actually call it spiritual field work, because it's not, I don't come with like this scientific approach of like I'm going to be objective and separated from my subject matter, but actually it's all the contrary, There's a profound meddling and intertwining with that, not subject matter anymore, but that territory, those entities that exist. But, I've been very wary of academic extractivism. The same way that there's economic extractivism, there's academic extractivism too, where you have artists, writers, filmmakers, sociologists come into the territories, extracting information, writing their papers and books and doing their films and never coming back. So that's something I'm very wary of. And one of the ideas of doing the book was going back to those communities that have taught me so much and say thank you. And this is the token of my gratitude, no? So when I was describing when I went back earlier this year in January to go, I didn't even take a camera. I was like, I'm not going to even have the temptation of a camera. I'm not even going to take an image out of this territory this time. I'm just going to go and leave something, not take anything out. So the book was also kind of, it allowed me to do this process that for me was necessary in the whole, construction of this body of work, is that there has to be a moment where I give back. I not only take, but I give back. And the book was my way to give back.